p.m. on Monday, April 25th, 2022, and I hereby call this meeting of the Board of Education of Nordonia Hills City School District to order. This is a typical meeting of the Nordonia Hills City School District Board of Education. It's a meeting in public, but is not a public meeting. The public is invited to watch the proceedings of the board. There will be opportunity for public participation in the open forum section of the meeting just a little bit later. Please be sure to sign in. Well, you should have already signed in, as now that the meeting has started, no more signatures for signing in will be taken. If you are uncomfortable with open forum, please know that your comments and questions can always be submitted to the board and administration through emails and phone calls. Mr. Brown, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Curdy.
Here.
Mr. Larmer.
Here.
Mrs. McKinley.
Here.
Mr. Tidmore.
Here.
Ms. Bonich.
Here.
All board members present.
If we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda, please?
I'll motion.
I'll second. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney.
Yes.
Mr. Larmer.
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley.
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore.
Yes.
Ms. Bonich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, I'm so excited about this board meeting because it's the first time in a long time where we've invited kids here. We used to bring kids all the time, and then COVID, and as we seem to be getting through that, I'm so excited because we have some great things going on. And today we're going to start out with Rob Eckenrode, our athletic director, talking about our state qualifiers for bowling and wrestling. Rob?
Thank you, Dr. Clark, and members of the board. We appreciate you having us here this evening. As you said, we had a terrific winter season. We got plenty of young men and one young lady that we're going to recognize tonight on their qualifying for the state tournaments in their respective sports. So first, I'd like to call up our sophomore bowler ladies first. So sophomore bowler Colby Lewin. Colby advanced to the state championship tournament this year in Columbus, and ended up finishing 32nd in the state of Ohio with a 541 series down at Columbus. Colby, you want to come on up?
Let's have them stand up here in the front, and then we'll shake their hands.
Okay, this next group, they seem to be here pretty much every year, but our Varsity boys bowling team advanced to their third consecutive state bowling tournament and their fourth one in the last 5 years. This year, our boys team actually finished the highest out of any Nordonia boys team in the school history. They were third in the state of Ohio this year, so they did a tremendous job. And we'd like to recognize the guys on the team. Was made up of seniors Kyle Drazel, Matt Hupsey, Ben Jariga, Evan Taronsky, and juniors Bryce Lewin, RJ Lewis, Jeremy Patterson, and Matt Willis. So guys, come on up. A special note, Kyle finished 6th in the state of Ohio to earn second team All-Ohio honors with the 676 series, and Bryce was a state runner-up, finished second in the state of Ohio with a series of 719. So they were fantastic.
And so our new board members know you have provided them with gift cards to either burritos or chicken. I'm not really sure, but they will like it anyway. And we'll ask the bowlers if you guys would come down the gauntlet and shake our board's hand. We'd be very happy to do this.
Next, we have two young men from our wrestling team that also danced the state wrestling tournament this winter in Columbus. First, sophomore Israel Petit. Izzy, this was his second time qualifying for the state tournament, and he went on and finished 7th place at the 138-pound weight class. Israel, come on up. And our next wrestler earned his first state tournament berth, junior Jeremy Olsko, at 165 pounds, finished 4th in the state of Ohio in his weight class. I think they both bulked up a little bit since wrestling season. They're in the back of the weight room getting ready to fight.
Thanks, Rob, and congratulations to our athletes. You guys continue to make us proud. And you are absolutely welcome to stick around for the rest of the board meeting. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Or, I know Rosati's is open. I don't know what their flavor is, but I think you deserve ice cream. So you're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to quietly make your ways out. Congratulations. Okay, now the next thing that is super exciting to us, you know that we are focused on STEM. We're doing what we can to continue to build our STEM program. We're not where we want to be, but we're getting there. And another big step is our new robotics team. And running that is Kelly Neisen, a teacher at the high school. So Kelly, you want to come up and talk about the team and show the bot and whatever it is that you have to get?
Good evening. This year I was tasked with starting a robotics club, and so we decided to compete in the FRC competition. If you don't know anything about the FRC competition, we were given 10 weeks, 3 crates of things, 10 weeks to build a robot to do certain challenges. And the challenges vary from year to year. This year was shooting a ball at 2 different levels and also a climber. Being our first year, we didn't quite get to designing the climber and putting it on. However, we accomplished every single goal that we set out to when we stepped foot in the convention center, the end of March. My goal for these 4 young boys was, when we plugged in the robot, it worked. And it did. It did not catch fire. And it is still working today. But one thing that FRC really stresses is gracious professionalism. And I was blown away. The moment we stepped foot into our pit, there were 60 teams there, not all from Ohio. The one team that helped us, honestly, every single 3 days we were there was from New York. They came over, what do you guys need after a match? When things weren't going well, what do you need fixed? What do we want to do next? After the first day of our practice matches, we were like, okay, the ball got up there, but we didn't score a point. The next day we said, let's score a point. We scored 2, 3, something like that. So And out of 60 teams, we actually were ranked 53rd, which I can't complain about that. And we also won the Rookie Inspiration Award from the Buckeye Regional. They wanted to show off a little bit of what it can do. There was balls that we had to pick up and then essentially shoot it. And as you can see, sometimes it doesn't go as planned, and it broke. And that is when you're on the field, because you have 3 minutes. The first 30 seconds is all automated. So you had to program the robot without you controlling it, and then the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you can control it with the. And so if that happened, which that actually happened to us an awful lot, we went on defense and was trying to help our other team score more and the other not score more. So thank you very much for this opportunity. We hope to grow this program even more, because I think the boys had a lot of fun and have a lot more ideas come out of this. So thank you.
Stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. Yeah.
Ms. Dyson, if I could make a request, if you could make a robot next year that calls snow days, that would be greatly. Yeah.
I did forget to mention that our robot's name is Todd.
Todd. Congratulations to our robotics team. Thank you for starting this program. We're looking for great things in the future. And Kelly, of course, will be teaching students in our new innovation lab at Nordonia High School next fall. Congratulations, Kelly and team. Thank you very much. And you two are welcome to stay, or you're welcome to go get some ice cream.
I do have to admit, getting kids back here is just it's the way things are supposed to be. So
Nice to see it.
glad to have them all back.
All right, and then the next item is really, I wanted the board to have an opportunity to discuss the steering committee recommendation. You know that last month, our steering committee, which had been meeting since September, presented to the board their recommendations for facilities. And I want the board to have the opportunity to show full transparency in their discussions. So I'm not asking the board to vote on anything tonight. It's really just an opportunity for the board to discuss their thoughts about the steering committee recommendation. And Don Ferrante from Sol Harris Day is here in the front row. He's an architect who could answer any questions that you might have. And also Matt can talk to the board about what the timeline would be if the board decides that they want to move forward.
So I'll just start real quick so everyone kind of knows what the timeline is that we're looking at if the board decides to move forward in this endeavor. Under Ohio law, it governs how a school district can put a levy on the school ballot or on the election ballot, whether it be an operating bond levy, emergency levy. So we're looking at a bond levy in this instance. And as a result, there are specific deadlines that the board has to meet to be able to put that levy onto the ballot in November. Specifically, because we will be utilizing a special needs determination, that is a statute requirement provided by Ohio Department of Education. The first resolution for that special needs determination will need to be made no later than 120 days prior to the November 8th election. So that's July 11th. would be that requirement. And basically that's giving telling the board, or telling ODE that the board would like to use that special needs designation. It's not putting anything on the ballot, it's just giving a notice to ODE saying, hey, we want to go on to the ballot potentially for this dollar amount. We need your blessing, essentially, that we can do that. The more important items or resolutions that need to be taken care of are two specific resolutions that have to be done in two separate board meetings. The first resolution would be called a resolution of necessity, and the second resolution would be a resolution for proceeding. And those both have to be passed by the 98th day prior to the November 8th election, which would be August 2nd. And then by August 10th, which is 90 days prior to the election, I'd have to submit all of that documentation to the Summit County Board of Elections so that they could get it on the ballot. So wanted to put that out there for you so you're aware of the timeline, timeframes that we're looking at. A lot of moving parts between now and then, but if you have any specific questions, I'll get through that.
I just want to start by thanking the steering committee. I know you guys put in a lot of time. We had quite a few meetings. Thank you for everything you did. It was a lot of work. I know in most meetings there was between 20 and 30 people there. We had a number of meetings, so just start by saying thank you.
Yeah, Matt, just to follow up to that, how much does it cost to certify a bond issue to the ballot for the school district?
So it from my experience in Cuyahoga County, it was depending on the amount of issues on the ballot, and they would distribute it out, prorate the costs for the full rollout of all the elections. So it's hard to know the true number. It just depends on how many different levies are put on throughout the whole county. I'm assuming that's the same for Summit County.
I mean, is it like 5 to 10,000? Is it 100,000? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know that. I can find that for you and get you that information, but I don't know off the top of my head what that would be.
and what do we do if costs escalate beyond what we projected? Do we turn to residents and ask for more money, or how does the school district handle that?
A multifaceted approach, really.
The steering committee did discuss that somewhat, of having basically a plan A and a plan B. So, plan A might be 3 brand new buildings. Costs escalate, maybe the plan B is 2 buildings and renovate a third. So I know that was discussed at different meetings about having a contingency. It's going to really, how much can we pass? How much can we certify? How much can we pass? How much, where the costs go from here.
And on top of that, obviously, if you would move forward with a bond levy, once that debt is issued, we would have the ability to invest those funds as the drawdown period starts, and that would accumulate interest earnings, most likely in the multi-million-dollar threshold, to help for any overages. Additionally, there are additional resources that the district could utilize if we needed to tap into any overages, but let's plan ahead so that we know that we're not going to need to do that.
Sure. And just to segue off of that, is there any way that we could lock in like a maximum price agreement? Like I know North Royalton did that recently when they built new facilities,
Yeah.
which I think protects obviously the district.
Sure.
Is that an option for us?
Yeah, and Don maybe will provide a little bit more input into that, but you have various options when you go out and select a contractor. The most recent trend is a construction manager at risk type of deal where you settle on a guaranteed maximum price for a building contract. Basically, that contractor has to work within those price restrictions. Now, scope enhancements, errors and omissions, that can expand that beyond what the guaranteed maximum price is. So those are things to factor in. And when you're going through a construction project, you always kind of set aside 1 to 2% of contingency just for those very real issues that could come up.
Sure.
I don't know, any other things you want to add?
You hit the main points. The other thing as we go through design, and you actually have your construction manager on board, they are working hand in hand with the design team. So they will advise, consent in the sense of where the market is and where construction costs are. And the biggest thing we do on every single project is, the goal for every school district is we meet the educational needs. That's our priority. If there are some things that we can enhance, then we may look at those things as doing as alternate bids. So what happens there is, at the time of bid day, if the numbers come in less, then you have an opportunity to look at the alternate list to select some of those enhanced features that you may want to do in the facility. So the models work well. I know we've gone through some turbulent times here in the last year or so, but hopefully things will stabilize here in the future.
Just to follow up too, when you're saying stabilize, I mean, what are, looking forward in the next year or two, just because I pulled research from the Association of General Contractors, and they had indicated that from 2020 to 2021, there was essentially a 19% increase in cost to build. So how do we wrestle with that as a district? I mean, that's more than 2 or 3%. 20% is astronomical.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, literally, and I think I shared this information, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, every year in April, they come out with what they call as a cost set. So they look at the industry standards in the sense of construction cost, and they adjust the cost per square foot for their buildings based on where they see that trend is going. And literally, it wasn't an official release, but I was able to get the information last Friday, and they adjusted it just over 19%. So when they do that, when it comes out in April, they are projecting out when the shovels will hit the ground. This is the largest increase based on construction cost inflation that they've done in over a decade. So they are doing their due diligence. Like I said several times, they are serving all the school districts in the state of Ohio, so they're trying to make things right there based on what they're trying to tell school districts where the budgets may fall.
Has that number ever gone down in your experience?
It's interesting you say that. During the recession time of 07, 08 era, take it back. When we went through 04 and 06, there was kind of an inflation spike there where it was hitting like 6%, and then we had the recession. And then, as I mentioned about the cost set, they were projecting what that cost may be. Well, when we actually had a few projects in 07 and 08, they were coming in 25% under budget because of the recession.
Because of the recession.
So, like I said, you don't know what that future's going to hold, but they've never brought the cost down, to my knowledge.
It looks like from the article that I pulled, they did from 17 into 19. So 2017 into 2019, it looked like it was actually negative 5% at the end of 2019.
I knew there was a couple years where it remained flat, but I didn't realize they may have went down 0.5%.
I don't have anything further for you, but thank you for answering those.
So when we started this process, Dr. Clark and I had some conversations prior to the steering committee meetings. I fully expected us to come into this and reduce at least one building. Then the steering committee came in and we had talks about building 2 buildings, 3 buildings, 4 buildings. I was really shocked to see the community was, people in the steering committee were really interested in getting rid of 2 or 3 buildings, depending on which route we go. So there could be some significant operational savings somewhere here in the future. It might not hit right away because we got to wait till we can get some buildings up and running and shut some buildings down. But I thought that was a pretty interesting, and I also kind of thought when we started that we'd be looking at K-8 buildings and maybe just some upgrades and renovations on our high school. And the steering committee was very adamant that the high school is the face of our community. That's what brings 5 municipalities together. That's where everybody meets. That's where we have our events, our sporting events, our community. So they were pretty adamant that They really want a new high school to pull this together.
Matt, I have one more question, I apologize. If the bond fails in November, what's the process for the district? I'm assuming the board would determine if we would try again come May. Do we have to pay the contractors anything for that failure if it didn't pass in November?
We don't really enter into any contracts until we have that money from the bond issuance. So, there would be some ancillary charges for the pre-bond work that's done by Dominic's firm, but we've already entered into that contract. So.
I think a bond issue will tell a lot. I've talked to, I don't live in the community, you know that, but I've talked to a lot of people, and I think the several things that are constants are people recognize that our buildings are old, that our buildings are not efficient. People recognize that consolidating is a good thing. I think nobody wants to pay more in taxes. I think those are all common. But I think that the steering committee has put together a nice plan, and I think the community will support it. If I'm wrong, I think what the board would need to do is decide, okay, so what next? And I think that depends on how it does in the election, right? If it's close, what does that tell us? Or if it loses significantly, I think that tells us something completely different too. And does that tell us that maybe we're asking to bite off more than we can chew? I don't know. The steering committee was pretty consistent that this is a solid plan. It's like Chad said, it's much bigger scope than I had ever expected too. But I think it's a wise plan for sure. So if I were guiding the board, I'd say if the steering committee has spoken, I think we should take their plan and see if the community agrees with it.
I think the piece that is standing out so prevalently to me is that we've crossed the 2/3 threshold. When we look at renovating versus construction, and it's like that old car you've got sitting in the driveway. And it's like, do I put more money in it, or is it just going to keep nickeling and diming me? Is it time to upgrade? Whether as a car, you go buy your new used car, or you go and purchase brand new. That 2/3 threshold is alarming, and we have passed it. We have a building with a sinking foundation. You guys hear the things that we are fixing every year. And those fixes are not getting any easier. And when we look at ourselves educating children in the 21st century, what does that look like? Well, Mr. Russ, it's getting a little harder and a little harder to make sure that our buildings are capable of running what is needed for that educational process. So those are all things that are running through my mind.
I mean, I guess to that point, having had that conversation with Mr. Russ, and even just our technology infrastructure needs that we have, just looking at our current condition and current capacity, we're not set up to accommodate that. And so, I mean, we all could probably weigh in, and I agree. I've been in conversation with several of our community members trying to figure out what are some of those points. And I hear inflation, so let's just deal with that, right? A lot of times we hear people talking about, well, the cost of what it's going to take to build, but think about that in relation to the cost it's going to, for renovations. And I don't think that there's a separate set of wood for renovation that there is for building. So we're going to pay for renovations, but we don't want to, like to your point, put more money into buildings that won't be able to A, accommodate the technology infrastructure that we need, or B, even at some point, well, we fix the walls and we do the cosmetic things to make it feel and look better. But then as the foundation is sinking, we all know little that I've learned about the process is that you can't do anything when you've got a bad foundation. So, those are all price points. And I think like Dr. Clark said, what we really need to do is when we put it, or if that is the direction we go in, we'll know, and the voters will tell us, hey, we're with it or we're absolutely not. And I think If it is close, then we need to consider what is that response to that. But we're definitely in a place where we've gone, as Liz said, beyond the 2/3 threshold. And I think our kids just deserve better. I think they deserve better. And, I'm kind of in that midpoint because I've got an itty bitty who will probably benefit from this. My eldest that's in the district won't, but she'll be able to have somewhere to come home to and be proud of. So that's my way in.
Do we know when the operational savings will kick in? I mean, do we have an estimate, a year from now once we consolidate buildings potentially? How do we know where we're saving all that money or when?
I guess that's a little bit of a variable, but ideally, what we talked about is anytime you take down a building, you're potentially going to be saving roughly $700,000 per year over that span. So it does add up significantly over that period, and ultimately it may help pay for the new facilities down the road. So, I mean, I always make this comparison at home. It's, I'm a father, I got 2 kids, it's kind of like somebody brought up the car issue. It's like now I got 5 cars sitting at home because, each kid has to have a car. And you just see the maintenance of everything that you're taking care of keep on going up and up. So one of my kids got to be graduate, you're on your own, so have fun maintaining your own vehicle, where my costs are going to go down because I don't have to help maintain that anymore. So I kind of use that comparison all the time. And, the less buildings, the less square footage you got to take care of over time, it's definitely going to save you cost.
Another real issue about the cost savings is staffing, quite frankly. And I'm leery to say this because I don't want teaching staff to go into a panic thinking, oh, we're going to eliminate teachers. That's not the plan. However, running 3 separate elementary buildings is more costly than running 1 separate elementary building, because to reduce class sizes, like at Ledgeview, where my average class size might be 25, and at Northfield it's 15. If those were together, that saves me a teacher. And I think that when you combine the elementary schools, you could save upwards of 10 teaching positions. I think when you combine Lee Eaton and the middle school, you could save probably upwards of 6 teaching positions. My hope would be that you do it through attrition. We have a staff that is, they were young when I started, and now they're a lot older now. We have staff members that are getting close to retirement, and I think part of when we see what's going to happen in the future, what happens in November, does the board put it on? If it passes, then we start being very conscientious about, okay, well, we know that according to this timeline, in 2 years we should have a new elementary building. So can we not replace this teacher, or could we put a sub in, or could we just know that we're going to be reducing some spots? It's absolutely not an exact science, but I think that's where you start to see it, is when the buildings are combined. That's where the costs are. The cost in any school is people, right?
So
It's a people-run organization for sure, and that would be the best place to be able to see a savings, is over time eliminating the use for having multiple teachers in multiple places, or being able to use the same teacher over in this other building or whatever. So for sure, I've seen that happen in other places as well. But also, I just wanted to mention, also, Dr. Clark brought up my same feelings about it, was that I've been, since before I was a board member, I have been following the steering committee and what they're doing since its inception in the fall. And if what has come out of that is any indication of what the community is going to do vote-wise, I really feel like it's a positive thing. And that's just been my observations from being part of that and getting reports from that and hearing from the people in the community. So far, it really does seem like the best direction to try and take. Sorry, I interrupted somebody else.
No, you're fine. Hey, Matt, can you speak to, though, you were talking about, I guess, kind of investing in, you were talking about the drawdown, and so there is potential where the funds that we are allocating can earn us residuals that can go into the project itself? Is that what I heard from you?
Yes, that's correct. So obviously, we'll have a significant amount of money at one point to invest and use and make sure that it is maturing at certain times to meet our drawdown requirements to make payments to Don or to the other construction workers that we work with.
Not to you.
Not to you specifically. Yes,
Don't get me in trouble.
your architect, sir. Yes. But that's going to happen over a 5-year period or however long the construction time frame is. So during that time, that money is sitting and working for us while we're working on the project. And we ladder the maturity so that we have the money available to pay down the current commitments that when they come due. So in actuality, as there's the flip side to rising interest rates hurts when you issue debt, but then it also helps with the investment of those funds as well. So there's a flip side to that evaluation too that we have to consider. And yes, we could use those funds for helping complete the project. It's a good backstop to have if you have overages, run into those price fluctuation issues, to have that interest available to pay for those instances.
So we typically assist the district in putting together what we call a cash flow projection, so that they know when bills would be coming through the construction progress, that Matt would be able to say, all right, those funds are going to be available to be paying out once I see those bills. So as you can imagine, the big dollars will be coming 2-3 years down the pipeline when, the shovels on the ground, the building's starting to go up. That's where your big construction costs will be when they'll start seeing invoices coming from projects.
And the last thing a treasurer wants to do is listen to a superintendent open his mouth. But if you're talking about $150 million in bonds that are issued, and you're investing them at about 3% while you're waiting to pay some bills. I mean, we're not talking. We're talking pretty sizable millions of dollars in growth that could help pay for something.
Matt, when does our next bond fall off for the community?
So the last year a taxpayer would have to pay on the 2000 bond issuance would be 2025.
So
So
starting,
roughly 3 years.
so starting in 2026, for every $100,000 of value, you could taxable drop on $75. And then in 2030, it comes down, like the next bond issuance is off, and then it drops, that was a small one, it's only about $12 per 100,000.
I think you had mentioned invoices, or at least obviously during construction, I'm assuming you're going through a lot more detail. Obviously what was submitted to us is very broad, right? I mean, as far as actual what's going into the buildings. So how do we ensure kind of twofold? One, that there's no surprises, and two, that we're good stewards of taxpayer money. For instance, Brexville Broadview Heights, I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about the $26,000 slide that was going in their new facility. So how do we prevent that here in our district?
So I will share this with you. I mean, so when any district goes through this process, a district typically hires a construction manager, and then of course the architects on board also. We work for you guys. I mean, I always tell district that we're watching out for your dollars in the sense of how they ultimately will get spent, and also how we design the building, potentially save dollars that way. When we get into construction and there's potentially, I'm going to just bring up board changes and the contractor's got to submit a change request for it. Those requests come to us and we evaluate them. So it's not just a rubber stamp or we're like, all right, here you got to pay it. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth that goes on in our office to help reduce that cost. And I can say this for a fact, we have reduced cost as they come across our desk before they actually get to the owner's desk. So at the end of the day, I mean, we know budgets are going to be tight, but ultimately, it's part of our job to watch those dollars forward.
And the design phase is committee work too, right? I mean, there are board members on these committees with teachers, with community members. So I don't know much about Brexville. I'm hoping that if they put a $26,000 sliding board in, that they had the whole committee agreeing to that. If not, that's the sign of a dysfunctional committee. I would think that our committee would get what is best for Nordonia kids, right?
And I'd also add too, if typically the best practice would be if there's a change order over $50,000, that would not be fully approved until the board approved. So that it would be brought to you so you're aware of why we're doing this change order, what's it for, what's the purpose, and then ultimately you as a board have a decision whether to move forward with that change order.
That's typical, I'm glad you brought that up, man. Typically, that's how it's done, even on the state side. There's usually the state is involved in your project. The local state representative would only have an authorization to go up to, the same level as, the superintendent would be. But if it was more than $50,000, then they would have to go down in performance, just like it would come to you as a board so.
Dr. Clark, what happens to our school facilities that we're leaving, essentially? If this bond is passed, we consolidate the facilities. Are they offered first to private institutions for education, which I know we just had a meeting on?
Yeah, we did. No, that's a big concern, and I think that the answer to that is, to be answered later. But I know what our concerns are. Our concerns are that we do not want charter schools to come in and purchase abandoned buildings from us, which state law allows them to do, unless you do something with them first, which might mean raising some buildings. It might mean, and I'm willing to be very creative. I think that our communities have been supportive of us. I'm willing, and the board would obviously have to agree to something like this, but if there's any kind of partnership we can come up with our communities, if it's land swaps or even land donations, because when we go from 6 buildings to 3, we're not going to need all that extra land. We're not going to need empty buildings, and we're not going to need to take care of it, right? And this is going to be a plan that takes us for the next 75 years. So my hope would be we do anything in our power to not let them get into charter schools' hands. And that would be a process I think we would start probably right after the design phase starts, when we can start talking to our attorneys to get us through what do we have to do specifically so a charter school can't come in and purchase those.
Thank you.
I just want to, so I was following a conversation on social media regarding some of this building stuff. Just to be clear of how it works, we passed the levy in 2019. And in 2020, everybody's taxes went up. In 2021, they did a reappraisal. Some people's taxes went up, some people's taxes stayed the same, some people's taxes went down. But we still get the same amount of money in 2021 than we did in 2020. This one individual was complaining that their taxes went up in 2019 or 2020, and then the school got all this more money in 2021 with the reappraisal. I cyber-stalked this person, so I pulled their real estate records. This person had a huge increase in the fair market value of their house. So their taxes did go up another 16% the following year. But if that individual's taxes went up 16%, then other people's held the same, other people's went down. But the school district got the same amount of money.
And that's House Bill 920 that we talk about every time we're on the ballot.
Right, but I just want to reiterate this because this individual was out there on social media spreading this, that, hey, we got whatever it was, $7 million, and then we got more money in 2021. We did not. We got the same amount of money. So I just want to reiterate that we're not, every time your market value of your house changes, the school does not get more money. And that's going to be the same with this bond issuance. Sometimes your payments might go up, sometimes your payments might go down. It's going to fluctuate based on the fair market value of your house.
I have a question too for you. As far as lifespan of the building, so let's say we construct new facilities, what's the lifespan average before major renovations are needed? Do you know?
Yeah, you can ask some districts. I've been in some districts where they're still standing over 100 years. Typically, working with the state all the time, and just from my perspective, the goal is that 50 to 75 year mark. But just like a new car, there's very little maintenance that you have to do up front with it, but as the years go on, you will have to do those maintenance items. And that's another big thing with most districts. I know we talked about it a little bit. Right now you got 6 buildings that you're trying to maintain, and you're in that point where the life cycle of those buildings are 2/3 beyond its life, and there's a lot of things that are happening and breaking and so forth. So as you go through this potential building project, you're gonna see those costs, not be coming in that and say, well, we need to pay for this, we need to pay for that, because this broke and that broke. So, but you do have to plan for the future. I mean, just like anything else, there are gonna be repairs that are gonna happen, 10 or 15 years down the road once the buildings are.
And that's, the reason I asked, I recently was in Lee on a tour, and of course the renovations there were done when I was there back in 2001. And there was major leaking in the gym facility. So, obviously seeing that only roughly 20 years old, it's shocking to see that happen, but of course, I think we have to ensure that in the future we can pay for those repairs or regulars. Thank you.
We understand what you say on some buildings being over 100. I personally work in a building that's over 100 years old, including rain inside once in a while.
Any other comments or discussion from the board?
Matt, I hate to keep throwing you questions out there in the hot seat tonight. How, the bond is 37-year, is that?
That's a calculation that we'd have to work out with our bond counsel, depending on what type of equipment, furniture, fixtures, those type of things are built into that. The max we could do would be a 40-year, but then once you start that's if you're just doing strictly building improvements or new construction. But once you start building in furniture, fixtures, and equipment that have a shorter lifespan, that brings down the maturity that you're legally allowed to do. So we're looking at probably at the max, a 37-year maturity. At the max.
And then do we, in the future, would we have to look at, for instance, like a PI levy to supplement the monies to repair, for instance, like a leak, the roof leaking?
Yeah, it's hard to say that far down the road. A lot of things can change in 25 years or whatever the case may be, but it's definitely a real issue at that time when things start breaking at that magnitude. You usually have some kind of revenue sources for historical purposes. Our general fund has covered that.
We've been funding that out of our general fund for the last 11 years now.
Yeah. A perfect world. Again, everybody's heard us say this. We're the only district in the county without a PI fund. We're fortunate that we have some MGM money coming in that we're able to put into a PI account. In a perfect world, we would have a small PI levy that would be renewed every 5 years or so that would take care of those small repairs, or that would build a reserve so when we needed to buy a new boiler, it was all there. That's an imperfect world. And right now we have MGM money in our PI fund.
Just as another side note, I'm just thinking about cost savings. So these are all probably 94, 96% efficient buildings. So then we're not talking running the old boiler systems. The, water, the way water is moved through a building and all of that. We could anticipate, and that might seem small on the grand scale of things, but every dollar counts. So we would be looking at more efficiently running buildings.
Typically, the schools that we design today, a lot of them have to be very sustainable. We're typically designing anywhere from 25 to 30% more efficient than what the Ohio Code allows us to set as a minimum.
However, I would fully expect that if we build new buildings, they'll be fully air conditioned. I'm sitting here sweating right now. So I would imagine that, I would imagine electric might go, we'd only have 3 buildings as opposed to 6, but there's certainly a cost to running air conditioning units.
There is, yeah.
Just out of curiosity too, have you folks built facilities in other counties in Ohio? And what counties would those be?
Yes, so we just completed Talmadge City Schools. In 2016, they had a bond issue. They ended up building a new elementary and middle school. We completed Lake Local Schools down in Parkville. They did a new elementary, renovated an elementary, and created a 712 high school. We just literally completed Indian Creek School District down in the Steubenville area. They just had their dedication for their new high school last week. I had to attend. But they did a new elementary, renovated another elementary school and a new high school. And currently right now we are breaking ground on 2 elementaries for North Kansas City schools. They just got their project underway this past year.
And Dom's not gonna like me saying this, but the fact is we only have Sol Harris Day under contract through the bond. And at that point, and we're very, very happy with the work that they've been doing, but this board would be able to go out for bids to select a new post-bond architect if it was interested in doing that.
I think also something to think about when we, beyond buildings, but start to think about the curricular aspect of the work that's done daily in our buildings. When you're pulling your grade bands together, and particularly in our 3 elementaries, you're bringing the best that they all 3 have, and you're pulling it together, and you have less waste. You have stronger continuity across the grade levels with all students across the entire district. Stronger continuity, and the amount of waste and you can minimize that. I think, and then even when you're doing your professional development, if you need to do something with a specific grade band or a group, they're there. You've got everyone. You don't have to wait for anyone to drive across town to get there to start. As soon as kids are gone, you can pull in and have your meeting or whatever it is you need to do. The efficiency of that, we're talking monetarily higher efficiency with buildings, but also the efficiency with the way the schools can operate internally, I think is an important thing to know as well.
Anybody else? I think it's really important that you had this discussion. I think it was a good discussion. There's a lot to think about. And so we'll continue to move forward. Thanks, Don, for being here tonight.
And I would just rehash, obviously, the next steps for you as a board to think about that we have to solidify if you're going to move forward. Is obviously the amount. We have to know that to be able to move forward with resolutions. We have to know the purpose of what we're doing those constructions for, obviously. And then maturity of the bonds and also the estimated interest rate. And those last 2 items, we would obviously work with our bond counsel and municipal advisor to kind of evaluate what interest rates would be a projection for when we issue that debt.
So we have come to the point of that meeting where we have our open forum. Although the public has the right to attend board meetings, it has no inherent right to participate in the deliberations of the board without its consent. Speakers may offer such objective criticisms of the school board operations and programs as concern them. But in public session, the board has the right to request that complaints about school personnel or against any person connected to the school system be directed to the appropriate administrator. The board asks anyone wishing to participate in open forum to please, well, it should have already signed the log this evening, and you will be called. We'll just go in order as they're written. Does that sound good? And then also, so everyone knows, we have a clock, so everybody knows you'll have 5 minutes and be able to see kind of where you are without having to be interrupted. So if we could stick to our 5 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated.
And before Matt calls, I'd just like to remind everybody, the board did change policy last month so that people do need to request in advance up until the moment the roll is called. And anybody in the future wishing to speak at a board meeting, you can come to the board meeting and sign up before it starts, or you could also go to our website under the board. You just click on the first icon there, and down on the right, register to speak at the board meeting. And there's actually several links. They all take you to the same place where you can click and fill out a form saying your name. Matt will get an alert right away, and he'll have you prepared for the next board meeting. So again, you can come and sign up before the board meeting here, or you could do it online at our website.
Okay, so the first one on the docket is Mr. Michael Esposito.
All right, good evening, Jason, Amy, Matt, I hope you, now that you get to see how the sausage is being made, I hope you find yourselves thinking that we're in good hands, because I certainly think we do. By way of background, some of you have heard me speak before. I do public sector plan department at the state of Ohio. This is something I'm intimately involved with. I spent the better part of the last week arguing with people about ARPA funds and one-time monies and why you cannot just spend based off stuff that's given to you one time. And what my clients, what I hope we're going to be talking about doing, is investing in long-term things, playing the long game and not selling ourselves short. I thought it was an excellent analogy about maintenance on a car. At some point, we need to reinvest. At some point, we need to look long-term for things. As we talk about things in the state of Ohio, I was extremely disappointed recently to hear that the state of Ohio has done yet again another punch to the gut in school districts. We've had an unconstitutional funding system for decades based on property taxes. Thank God we got NGM settlement last year, because after the recent legislation where they made it harder for school districts to actually challenge evaluations, thank the governor for that and the parties who are doing it. It's just going to continue to get pushed down to us. That doesn't mean we have to take it, and I hope we don't. But as I've talked about things, I grew up in a place, Chagrin Falls, we never met a levy we didn't pass. When I became part of this community, I loved the diversity of it and its up-and-coming nature. When I was in that area, areas like Twinsburg and Aurora were not what they are today. And some people have chided me for comparing us now to where they were then, and we're an up-and-coming community. I love living in a place that is committed to excellence, committed to public services, police, fire, school districts, the infrastructure. When we passed the last levy, I was thrilled because we had the opportunity to, you can go one way where you don't provide funding in your services, or you can go the other way and continue to be a desirable community. And we chose the latter, becoming a desirable community. And I think this is the next evolution of that. From what I've seen about the steering committee, you have a lot of people who put a lot of time and effort into this, not people who just want to spend money frivolously, but they went through, they analyzed things, and they produced a recommendation that I would hope this board takes very seriously. Because you had more than 1,000 people communicating in this and coming up with the best way forward. I appreciate the questions from Matt. I appreciate the points you make, Superintendent Clark, about labor cost and things like that. I tell people, there are only so many seats around the table when you want to have a piece of pie. If the pie's not getting bigger, you don't have as many seats. And that doesn't mean people have to lose their jobs. But there are ways to do things more efficiently, and there are things that we can do, there are ways that we can set up our services and our service delivery so that we can deliver excellent services, maybe without as many people there, but everybody gets what they want at the end. Just so happens that sometimes you get a little bigger piece of the pie too. But at the same time, the public still wins because they're getting an excellent service and we're investing. But it's critical that we take the step forward now and move forward. And I also, I think in those meetings I talked about when Sagamore Hills originally was going out for its fire levy, they tried to say it was going to be cheap. It wasn't going to be cheaper. It'll never be cheaper because the cost of pension and labor cost is 24.5% for firemen. PERS is about 10%. But in hindsight, I was very concerned about that. And looking at what we're getting in Sagamore Hills with that cooperative district that Chief Ripley runs and Macedonia and everybody together, pulling together to deliver services, I'm thrilled I was wrong, because the services we get are outstanding with that collaborative approach. And I know, we're going to have a levy on to deal with that in Sagamore Hills, but we shouldn't shy away from it. We should continue to invest in this community. And I hope everybody who may be cautious, maybe, I get it, money's tight for everybody. I hope you realize that in the long term, the benefits you get from investing in this community, you will reap in home values, in the types of kids that are brought up in this community, and the growth that we have as a tremendous, diverse community moving forward. So, thank you very much. I got about 15 seconds left. Thank you, sir.
Okay, next up is Miss Karen Byers.
I'm Karen Byers, and I represent Building Boosters of Nordonia Hills. We support the buildings with a lot of different things that they can't get any other way. They come to me, and we support them. I'm also supporting PTSA at the high school and Positively Nordonia. And I'm here to talk about visionaries. Visionaries are rarely seen as visionaries when they're acting on their visions. It isn't until time has passed and the dust has settled that others can see what the visionary saw and acted upon. And we just went through a very good discussion, and I really thank you for having it before the open forum, because I think that was very respectful of everybody that's here, so they can take the opportunity to give you their opinion and hearing yours. You discussed it, very important, and the vision for the future of our Nordonia schools is what you discussed, but really the continuation of the vision of Nordonia schools, because that vision was started by the previous board with the Portrait of a Knight, which was started almost 4 years ago. And I served on the curriculum council, and there's a few other people here that served on that worked for 2 years. We met 8, 9 times to define what we want the students to look like when they graduate. You will, and you have heard reasons why we shouldn't move forward. Inflation, rising, we just can't afford it at this time. My favorite is, if the schools were good enough for my generation, then they're good enough for now. They don't need anything any better than I had. I feel like these responses lack vision. Prices will most likely never go down. I'm an accountant, I'm telling you, they're not going down. There's not going to be a sale on construction materials either. Like, we can go to Kohl's, but we can't get sale on construction materials. As people get older and they move through their lives, they change where they work and they change where they live to better themselves. It's time for the students of Nordonia to have a place where they can also better themselves. My daughter can tell you every bathroom in Lee Eaton that floods from all the toilets, and every bathroom in the high school, and what days they're closed because of the rain and the sewer and the sewage that comes through them. So it hasn't gotten any better from one school to the other. The students deserve a place to learn and grow in the ways that we will prepare them for the future that we will hand over to them. Do we want our children and grandchildren to be given the tools to take good care of us and the world as they grow up? Do you realize they're the ones that will be the future leaders, our leaders? And how trained do you want those students as adults to be when you walk into a doctor's office and they're the ones who are treating you for your future needs? That's really the question we should be asking ourselves, because we're training the students who are going to be the adults taking care of us when we hope to be really old. New facilities are the next step in taking this vision of Nordonia students and the Portrait of a Knight forward. It's a very, very big step, but you have set the plan and you keep working to move it forward. You allowed a committee of 31 community members 6 months to work and flesh out a recommendation with the community's input. You have both purchased and accepted as donations available pieces of land that could be very useful for new facilities. This brings us to all the discussions we have tonight. So you have the opportunity to show you are visionaries for the school district. You can continue to move it forward. Where can this school district be in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years? What types of students can this district be graduating? And what future can we show them? It's now up to you. Thank you.
Next up is Miss Becky Grell.
Notes as well. I just had a couple of basic points. I was on the steering committee. My name is Becky Grell. My husband and I have lived in Macedonia for 30 years, just over 30 years, and sent our kids to both St. Barnabas and Nordonia high schools. And it was a terrific experience. And with them, we are all very excited at just the mere prospect of new schools and the investment that we have at our fingertips, the potential for it. And a number of these points that I have on here have already been hit on. Definitely the long-term investment in our communities. One thing that wasn't touched on, and I know that this might not be the exact forum, but not just for our students and not just for our personal kids, but our collective kids, children's futures and our community. And the investment in the schools and what that brings in terms of economic growth, in terms of businesses coming in terms of families coming in, and just, again, creating a broader, stronger tax base that is capable of giving back more to the community and reinvesting. So investment in the schools is investment in the community, and we have always felt that way throughout. So just finally wrapping it up again, just a quick, positive, exciting note. I'm not the most exciting speaker, but I am so excited for the prospect. And for us as a community, to have something as a community to bring us together and work towards to say, we did this. We got these schools together, and we are all going to benefit from it in one way or another. So that is it. Our kids, our future.
Next up, Miss Janet Strange.
Hello. I was just saying back there, I don't have anything to add really now because there's nothing. We moved here as a family in 1985. I've always supported every levy. I am super excited that we may get new schools. I went to Akron Public Schools, and I was just down there today, and driving past like Woodridge and even a school in North Hill, and I'm like, we don't even have that here. I mean, 100-year-old school, that's not good. And I didn't even know about the foundation sinking. So, but one thing I've heard some concern about, like the older people in our community, and since I'm one of them now, I'm retired. A lot of my friends that are retired aren't going to vote for this. So I know they think it's just people with children in the school, but there's a lot of people my age out there that want this to happen. So I'm hoping it does.
All right, next up, Miss Katie Strange Gerlach.
Hello, my name's Katie, and I kind of wanted to talk as a parent in the district and just let you know that, as you may assume, a lot of us are here in support of placing the facilities bond issue on the ballot. I was part of the steering committee, so the 30-plus community members, we were able to come together and work on plans and proposals for the facilities, and I think it makes sense to take that next step and allow voters the chance to give their input on this topic by casting that vote, hopefully in November. And I think it gives people time to do their research and see how that's going to affect them as a family before they make that decision. We know that the independent analysis, the OFCC, like was mentioned before, we're at that 2/3 mark, and it's most cost effective to replace these buildings rather than put more money into them currently. And that's what we've been told by the experts that have done this, and I think it's important that we keep that advice. And this was recommended even in today's market with the elevated supply costs and the inventory issues. And I know that it was taken into account when developing budgets, and even demoing some of the buildings were in the proposal, if that ends up being what needs to happen, so that that's already in the budget. They're not going to come back and ask for money for that later. And like people have said, we can't predict with certainty that these costs will come back down. And replacing these facilities is a process that takes several years. Waiting will significantly delay our students gaining access to safer and more efficient buildings and programming. And I am an alumni of Nordonia, and I was kind of surprised to learn that there are some programming options that I had that are no longer available. And to me, that seemed backwards. You would think that kids are getting more opportunities and options, and something like languages, in the middle school, I had choices where there's seems like more limited choices now than what I had. And if we can reduce the buildings, then we have access to programming for lower grade levels to access the higher grade level instructors and teachers and staff members. So that just opens up, more options for our kids at earlier ages. I think we have amazing teachers and staff, and I think they deserve to work in better conditions. I think we all, like someone had mentioned, we change jobs based on our happiness and our job satisfaction, and we want to keep our, high caliber teachers, and we don't want them leaving for districts that have nicer facilities. And why would you blame them at some point if we're talking about some of the issues that we have? So another point that I appreciated tonight was, and want to kind of remind people of, are those other bond issues that are falling off in the future that I don't know the exact math, but looking at it, like, the example of home values that were given by the facilities committee meetings, it almost seems that it's going to even out at some point where when those monies start to fall off, yes, we'll pay more in taxes now, but we're going to get that break in a few years to help offset that. Because I know the finances is a big concern. And that's all I have for now. Thanks for your time.
And finally, Mr. Doug Masteller.
Hello, everyone. I'm probably going to repeat a lot of things that have already been said, so I apologize in advance for that. My name is Doug Masteller, resident of Nordonia since 1995. I've been involved in the schools for probably 20 plus years in one way or another. I'm the proud parent of 3 Nordonia graduates. Last of them graduated in 2017. All of them out in the world, making their way, doing very well. One on the verge of doing that. So got nothing but great things to say about the education that Nordonia provided to them, the opportunities they provided to them. I was involved with the Facilities Commission as well. And I think, part of the reason I decided to get involved with that is because I wanted to represent, people that don't have direct skin in the game anymore. There's a lot of parents that clearly want to have the best for their kids, but what about, those parents or former parents of students that are now out there that still have to pay taxes but aren't seeing a direct benefit in their schools? And, my perspective on that is that, someone did this for me. Someone out in the community 20 years ago when my kids were coming up, they made sacrifices or they paid taxes that ended up benefiting my kids. And so in some ways it's my turn. I talk about my 3 kids that went through schools. They all had unique experiences. They're all very different kids. They're all great in their own ways. But if you think about the classes that they took and the experiences they had, it was across the whole spectrum. They were involved in sports, music, they were in science Olympiad, they took AP classes, and they took the most basic classes you could take. The point is, though, that Nordonia was able to offer all that to them. Now, they didn't have the opportunity to take robotics. I watched that presentation earlier today. That's fantastic. What's that going to be 10 years from now? Probably something we can't even imagine. So we need to be in a position to support that and maybe see around the corner a little bit and provide environments that are flexible enough to support whatever's coming around the corner, whatever's coming around the corner. I think probably you've all read recently about the big investment that Intel is making in the Columbus area, $20 billion microchip factory. Incredible. And that's a great thing for the state of Ohio. And I don't think, there's a long list of reasons why they picked Ohio. I guarantee they wouldn't have picked Ohio if Ohio wasn't committed to education and if the area that they're in didn't have the resources and the future employees that know what they're doing, that are well educated and that can contribute to their success at Intel. So, what's going on here in Nordonia? Well, I feel like we're in a similar position now. Intel is a unicorn, right? But we need to invest in our community for it to survive, to thrive. You've heard that a couple of times today, but I really believe that's true. And that doesn't mean Intel, but that means we have students and graduates that can go out into the world and do all kinds of things that you didn't even think of when you were in school. 10, 15, 20 years ago. Longer ago than that for me. I know the thing that we've heard a couple times is that it's not a good time, to invest in the future. That's not the way they're saying it, right? They're saying it's not a good time to spend money because it's expensive and costs are high. But you've heard the same comment made a couple times. Costs aren't going down, and if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? We need to take advantage of this as soon as we can because we're going to have operational savings, because we're going to have safety issues that need addressed sooner rather than later, and because most importantly, we need to invest in our kids. We need to invest in the community, and the best way to do that is to give the community the opportunity to vote on this law. So thanks for listening, and go Knights.
All right. So we're going to move on to committee reports. I'm going to start down there, Mr. Bidlaw.
Yes, so I want to make it my business every meeting to share with you the progress of the NDEIC, which is our Nordonia Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. And I hope, did I run everybody? All right, well, when we look at, it was mentioned actually at last meeting that we were extremely excited about the work that the Diversity Council has done and even how it has broadened its reach. And we are glad to announce again that we are going to host Nordonia's first Disabilities Week. And I think that is amazing. That will be during the week of May 9th through the 13th. On Monday, there will be a discussion about disability etiquette. On Tuesday, awareness and understanding of Down syndrome. Wednesday, learning about just the variation in learning disabilities. On Thursday, there will be a kindness campaign where there will be some embedded incentive for expressing and being intentional about being kind. And then Friday, understanding and awareness about autism. Also wanted to share with that there is now our grassroots group of students who are now participating in both the high school and the middle school diversity group, which is committed and led by our staff and community partners with the focus of making sure that we keep our district together. With that being said, I was so excited to hear about this initiative. They're saying they want to make kindness contagious. And I think right now in a world as we are recovering socially in our interaction, because it's not only the kids that suffered during this pandemic as we talk about coming back to this environment of being around each other. I think if we were very just transparent about how adults had to learn how to interact again, and maybe getting away from our screens, but putting more time back into being intentional about kindness. And so I can't wait to hear about how we're going to make kindness contagious here in our school district. Lastly, just wanted to tell you guys, stay tuned. The Equity and Inclusion Council as a whole, when you talk about diversity, there's still that push to make sure that we have staff members who are representative of the diversity that we are seeing emerging in our district. And so just know that that's still a priority, and I'm looking forward to the work that the team is going to do to make that a reality here. And not only just to get them to come here, but retention is important as well. And so that next piece is how do we make this a welcoming and inviting place to work and live for everyone that's a part of our community. That's all I got.
I don't have any report.
Just briefly, several weeks ago I had attended a kindergarten curriculum meeting, which was very fitting because of course my daughter will be starting next fall. And I learned a lot about the pilot programs that the kindergarten classes are doing. They were very interesting, and they really put students first, and I was encouraged to see that, and the dedication of the kindergarten teachers was absolutely phenomenal. So my hat's off to them and all the work they're doing. I look forward to learning more about it next fall as well. So that's it for me.
Okay, two committee reports actually. One was from the Nordonia Schools Foundation. We met on April 13th, and our guest speaker was science teacher Erin Coleman from Nordonia High School, and she was talking about the upcoming event that just happened this past week, DNA Day, which I got to attend, and I thought was super cool. The kids really seemed to get excited over that. They got to compete in they got to make different foods and have a contest. During the lunch blocks, there were different things going on with that. There was photo booths and everything else. But I was really impressed with the guest speakers that came in to talk to everyone about different various science careers. One of them was somebody who worked for the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Another person was a genetic counselor, so that was more on the medical side of things. But I just think it is so great when we have opportunities to show our kids different science careers. I mean, I left there wanting to have a science career. So it was really great. And again, thanks to the Nordonia Schools Foundation for their very generous donation towards that. The other committee I wanted to talk about was the Finance Committee. And my announcement for that is that the Board of Education is seeking applicants for the district's finance activities communications team, so FACT, F-A-C-T. The FACT Committee will be a committee of the Board of Education. It will comprise 6 community members, 2 board members, and the district treasurer. The mission of the FACT Committee will serve as a liaison between the board and the community, and it will provide objective perspectives on various school finance topics while working directly with 2 board committee members. The application window will be open until, is this right? This can't be right. It says April 18th, and that's not right. Yeah.
It should be May.
Okay, May 18th. The Board of Education will review all applications and make appointments at their May 23rd board meeting. If you have specific questions concerning the application process or the committee, please contact either the district treasurer, Matt Brown, or the board president, Liz McKinley. The application can be found on the Nordonia Schools website. If you just scroll down under latest news, it's the very first thing that's right there. So it's very accessible. You do not necessarily need to have any kind of career in finance or anything to be part of it. You just need to have an interest in learning more about how our district and schools are run and financed. And that's it for my reports.
The first thing I have is the Cbcc report from Mr. Verost, and he addresses Mr. Brown, Dr. Clark, and the entire board. On Friday, April 8th, Cbcc held the annual DECA competition. DECA, DECA, is the youth organization for students enrolled in the Sales and Service Fundamentals. The organization prepares emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management in high schools and colleges around the globe. DECA's challenges provide members opportunities to demonstrate the knowledge and skills learned in the classroom through innovative challenges in partnership with several corporate partners. The School of Nursing at Cuyahoga Valley Career Center held an information night on Tuesday, April 12th. Attendees were able to meet the supervisor, Patty Mandela, and staff who highlighted the program's requirements, curriculum, student, clinical, and classroom expectations, and more. Additionally, Erin Farnsworth from Cbcc's Student Support Services presented information on the financial aid process. Contact the Career Center for information on Cbcc's Practical Nursing Program. This past month, our high school education professions students were studying exceptionalities and went to the Cleveland Site Center, the CSC, to learn more. The Site Center provided a mini-in service to the students in dealing with visual impairment, the researching learning challenges. The topic was visual impairment, so the students were really able to add great depth to their paper and presentation. Finally, the next regular BOE, Board of Education meeting, will be this Thursday, April 28th at 7 p.m. at the Career Center. And that concludes his report, and he says thank you. And in other pieces of information for legislative, the big thing that the governor signed into law was House Bill 126. And Mr. Esposito, you touched on this evening when you were speaking. House Bill 126 modifies the Board of Revision process by doing the following. It prohibits Board of Education from filing residential and agricultural complaints. It permits the board, permitting Board of Education to file commercial complaints only when the property was sold in the year before the tax year for which the complaint was filed and the sale price was at least 10% and $500,000 more than the auditor's value. And then it bans private pay settlement agreements entered into after the effective date of the legislation. So it's a very hand-tying piece of legislation for public schools all across Ohio. And then the curriculum review committee meeting that I attended, our CAC, headed by Mr. Stewart, and it was a great presentation of pilots that are running currently at all of our elementary schools, focusing really heavily on phonics, based on research that the district has been watching for meeting student needs, and the research showed that the greatest need that our young learners have as they're learning to read was phonics, and so that's the area they're honing in on within these programs. So we're really excited to see how the outcomes of those go and the direction that the district decides to go in for those. And that's what I've got.
All right, let's move into the superintendent's recommendations. Item 1, I recommend you approve the consent items listed.
A motion?
I'll second.
The first of these items is approving the student handbooks for next school year. As we talked about, there were no substantive changes to these handbooks. It was just dates and names. And then, again, our community is so generous. They're always so thoughtful of the schools. An anonymous donation of $500 to Nordonia Middle School Track for the purpose of purchasing shoes for our kids in need. Office Max donated various school supplies and hand sanitizer at the value of $7,500. St. Timothy's Episcopal Church is donating $321 to provide assistance to the Family Support Specialist Program. And Faith Fellowship Church donated $120 to the Nordonia Prom outreach. We have a motion. Yep.
All right. Do we have any questions?
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore?
Yes.
Ms. Bodich?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 2 is a recommendation to approve an addendum to the administrator's contracts regarding Juneteenth.
All motion?
I'll second.
Juneteenth became a federal holiday last year. The governor signed into law that it is a requirement for school districts to celebrate that, and our administrators who work year-round, because their contract does not include that, we're modifying those contracts to give them Juneteenth as a paid holiday.
Just out of curiosity, since this is state law, what if we voted no?
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
I guess I'll be at work, but yeah, I don't know. To be honest with you, a lot of things that you vote on are just state law.
I was having this conversation with my wife and daughter. I don't know what happens if we vote no.
You anger a bunch of administrators.
Right. All right, that was all.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore?
Yes.
Ms. Bodich?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 3 is a recommendation to approve an MOU with OPSI. This is also for Juneteenth for our year-round OPSI employees.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
And again, so these are mostly custodians and maintenance workers. There may be a secretary or two that works year-round.
Any questions? All right.
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 4 is a recommendation to approve the contracts with the Summit Education Service Center.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Second?
This is an annual contract. We purchase a lot of services from the Summit ESC, including our gifted services, some physical therapy, occupational therapy,
School psychologist.
school psychologist. The next one is occupational therapy. Yeah, those kinds of things that we get through the ESC is a better rate than employ those folks ourselves.
Any questions? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 5 is a recommendation to approve the contracts for the Pupil Services Department.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
So these are physical therapy, occupational therapy, and also the LEAP program, which is a program that takes students with pretty significant behavioral issues, and we buy spots to put those kids in. We try to do it as infrequently as possible.
Any questions? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 6 is a recommendation to approve the student academic consumable fees for Nordonia High School for next year.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
As I mentioned in our board update, we charge the exact amount that we are charged by these companies, and what you will see typically happens. You'll adopt these today, and then we'll probably have several changes as prices change. But we like to get these published so kids can start paying their fees.
Any questions?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 7 is a recommendation to approve the personnel items listed.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
A few things in this agenda that I want to point out. First of all, Sarah Paris, high school math teacher who's been with us so long, has decided to change careers, and we wish her the absolute best. She is a complete rock star, and I think you could fairly say that this is one of those that you read about where COVID, I think, has worn people down and people are making career changes, and I think that's the case. Sarah's fantastic, and we wish her the best. You'll see that we are starting to hire some new teachers. I'm excited about these folks, and there will be an August board meeting in which we will invite all of the new teachers so you get to meet them in person. Kyle Fenn is a family and consumer science teacher who is a Nordonia graduate. We're excited about that. Danielle Miller will be teaching art here at Northfield. Tyler Stern, we are stealing from St. Barnabas. He's been there for 5 years. We're excited about that. And Joe Zephyr is a new high school intervention specialist who we are stealing from Painesville. The rest of the things in this personnel agenda are just typical kinds of things.
Any questions?
No.
Interesting to note, article I read just this past week, well, it would have been last week, seeing today's Monday, is an article about in the next 2 years, 40% of teachers are looking at either retiring or leaving the profession. 40%. And it makes you question who's going to be staying in classrooms. So it's very relevant in our current day and age. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 8 is a recommendation to approve reemployment of these certified staff members.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
So these are all of our teachers who do not have tenure. They do not have continuing contracts. You approve them for 1-year contracts annually.
Any questions?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Spodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 9 is a recommendation that you approve the new continuing contracts effective at the beginning of next school year.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
So these are the folks who do qualify for tenure, and they've all been recommended by their principals.
Congratulations to you. Yes. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Vodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And item 10 is a recommendation that you approve the non-renewal of the following staff members.
A motion?
I'll second.
So these are home instruction tutors and substitutes. We non-renew them to take them off our rolls, and then tomorrow they'll get a letter in the mail asking if they'd like to return to work next year to keep them from getting unemployment over the summer. And so starting next month, you'll start rehiring a bunch of these folks for next school year.
Any questions?
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
Mr. Larmer,
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley,
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore,
Yes.
Ms. Vodich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And that concludes my report.
You're up, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First item on the docket is to approve the consent items, and I recommend for approval.
Can I get a motion?
I will motion.
I'll second.
So we are approving the special board meeting minutes from March 8th, 14th, 21st, and 24th, 2022, as well as the regular board meeting minutes from March 21st, 2022, and the financial statements from March 2022. I will give a brief overview of our finances for the month of March. And keep in mind, too, I've made this point a couple times, but these financials are posted to our district website. I know it's kind of hard to see them up on that screen, so if anyone wants to dive into them a little deeper, they are available, and I wanted to point that out. So for the month of March, our total receipts are year-to-date are just over $49.1 million, and compare that to prior year through March of $44.1 million. So this is showing an 11.5% increase over prior year. Some of the main contributing factors to that currently are property tax and tangible personal property tax are higher than last year. Now, we won't have a clear picture until we receive our final settlement, which will happen in April, and at that point we'll be able to make a full analytical review of what that looks like when you compare that to last year's collections. The other area which I've touched on previously is in our restricted state grants and aid. That's showing a 1,213% increase over last year. The main purpose of that increase is due to the change in state funding. The state added some new elements to the restricted component of state funding, specifically student wellness, which historically we've received, but it was received in a special grant fund, and now they have rolled that grant fund into the general fund. So we still have to restrict the revenues, but it's in the general fund now, as opposed to previously. And also a new funding, increased funding to the gifted element of education. So there's increased funding for gifted education in the budget bill that's driving those restricted state dollars higher. And then the next item on the revenue front that's driving that increase, most importantly, is in the all other revenues, other local line item, and that's showing 162% increase from prior year. And what's driving that is the second installment from the MGM settlement was deposited into that general fund for now, and then that gives the board the flexibility to determine how they would like to utilize those funds moving forward. So that's a discussion the board can have in the future. But the money came in March, so we had to get it onto our books until future discussion is made on that. So then over on the expenditure side, year-to-date through March, we're just under $38.8 million compared to last year at the same time of $38.2 million, which is a 1.6% increase. The big ticket items that are showing the increases are in our supplies and materials and our capital outlay. Supplies and materials mainly is attributed to classroom supplies. Last year, there was fluctuations in what was happening with the school buildings and people being on site, or students being on site. And now, obviously, we've had the full year's worth of kids in our school buildings, so classroom supplies has gone up, as well as building supplies, fuel, which is currently at a higher percentage increase than we were seeing in the past. And then On the capital outlay front, we're showing an increase due to the completion of the interactive touch panels that a majority of them were funded through the ESSER funding. However, to complete the project, we had to supplement that through the general fund. So overall, we're showing a 1.6% increase in expenditures. So for our net income, we are at a $10.3 million net income. Compare that to last year at the same time of just under $6 million in net income. And what that attributes to is our unencumbered, unreserved fund balance of $21.3 million through the end of March. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Just a brief one, Matt. Do we see any bump in revenue from new home construction? For instance, in Sagamore, we have a lot of new homes. I'm assuming it's tax dollars.
Yes, so that'll happen in the first year that it hits the tax rolls. So depending on when those new constructions are done. In my forecast in May, I'll give a full update on the evaluations and how the tax year 21 is playing out for new construction. Yep.
And then it rolls back because of House Bill 920 in the subsequent years.
So we'll never get more money increase from those other than the first year that we come on with this rolls. Right. Just take a vote.
Yeah.
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore?
Yes.
Ms. Vodich?
Yes.
Motion carries. The final item is a resolution to approve a service agreement with Plant Connect. I recommend for approval.
I'll motion.
Second?
And just real quick on this one, we currently utilize planwithease.com as our third-party administrator for the district's 403B and 457B plans. And to increase our customer service, not only for the Treasurer's Department, but also for our district staff, I'm recommending that we change providers to Plan Connect.
Any questions?
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore?
Yes.
Ms. Vodich?
Yes.
Motion carries. And that concludes my report.
So that brings us to our time to adjourn. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be on Monday, May 23rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. at Northfield Elementary School, right here in this very room. So can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Kearney?
Yes.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tidmore?
Yes.
Ms. Vodich?
Yes.
Motion carries.